Welcome to part 7 of Enlightenment in a Revolutionary World. Now we're going to talk about revolution in France. Now, as I mentioned before, the sans-culottes in Paris are going to begin to take action. On July 14th, 1789, they are going to storm the Bastille. Now, they're looking for weapons and things like that. What they will do is they'll very quickly take over the government there in Paris, right? Throughout all of France, you're going to see, throughout the summer of 1789, chateaus be burned. You're going to see aristocrats flee into the countryside. Finally, you're going to have the National Assembly, who's now calling themselves the Constituent Assembly, form together and begin working on a new constitution. Okay. On August 4th, 1789, aristocrats who had joined the National Assembly, remember you had the Second Estate, First, Second, and Third Estates, right? Some First Estate aristocrats renounced their privileges. For example, the Vicomte de Noailles became Citizen Noailles. About a month later, or towards the end of the month, on the 26th of August, 1789, the Constituent Assembly ratified a statement of principles called the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. All right, this is a summary of Enlightenment thought, very similar to the American Bill of Rights, right? The right of assembly, freedom of worship, freedom of speech, freedom from undue arrest, things like that. But it also left a lot of things out. For example, it didn't really establish any rights for women, right? So you're going to actually have some reactionary groups form up because of that. Olympia de Gouges is going to actually form a group of her own, and she's going to write her own declaration, the Declarations of the Rights of Women, which will be published in 1791. Right? There's nothing in this declaration that addresses the inequalities in wealth between the rich and the poor, and property, and the Ancien Regime in France. Right? More ominously, the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen did nothing to address the proper balance of rights between the individual and the state. Right? So, again, Louis XVI has an opportunity here. He has an opportunity to embrace the Declaration and bolster support of the people, right, who are clearly on the edge of full rebellion. But once again, he vacillates, right? He kind of waffles back and forth. His biggest problem is he's got a little birdie in his ear giving him terrible advice. His wife, the Queen, Marie Antoinette, right? She is urging Louis to suppress the revolution, go in there, crush them. And because of this, Louis will hesitate before finally, several months down the road, he will finally approve the Declaration of Rights of Citizen and Man and Citizen. On October 5th, 1789, a Parisian crowd who was reacting to rumors that the king was going to act against the revolution and crush it will storm Versailles. Right? They're going to force the entire royal family into Paris and place them under house arrest in Paris in the Tuileries Palace. Right? And then the Constituent Assembly is going to continue to work on this constitution. It's going to take them 2 years to write this document. It'll be completed in 1791. Now, again, this constitution still gives King Louis an opportunity to maintain power. France remains a monarchy, but one governed by a constitution. Louis XVI would no longer be divine or absolute, but he would be named first officer of the state, right? He would retain control of the military, he would retain control of foreign policy, and he would have a suspensive veto, a veto that was good for 2 years on any legislation. It was not overridable even. It was an absolute veto. The legislature would be unicameral, and it would be elected every 2 years, right? It would initiate all legislation, it would control the budget, and it had the exclusive rights to declare war. The electorate itself would be consisted of male citizens who owned property. That's suffrage, right? About 4 million out of the 25 million population. That would give it the widest suffrage across all of Europe, including England, right? Now, if you wanted to hold a seat in the legislature, the electorate, or there were stricter property qualifications for holding a seat, but the vote, at least all you had to do was own land. The local government in France was to be, the old province system was to be dismantled and replaced with 83 equal departments who would have about 40,000 officials in each department that would make up the structure for the lower managing of government, right? The church itself is going to be federalized, right? That means that all church land is going to be confiscated to pay off government debt, redistributed to the peasantry, that clergy are going to become paid officials of the state. Priests and bishops will be elected by property-owning citizens, right? And don't even have to be Catholic, right? And then finally, society would see the abolition of privilege, right? All people are to be treated equal under the law, including blacks and mulattoes, right? And last little bit, guilds and monopolies are to be abolished. So this really was an attempt to empower the middling classes and to establish a system based on reason and on natural rights. But it depended on the cooperation of all different groups of people: the ruler, the ruling classes, the people in general, and, well, the rest of Europe as well. And in fact, pretty much no one was satisfied, right? The peasants were upset because the unlanded peasantry had no vote, and the peasantry in general still wanted to dismantle the economic disparities between the rich and the poor. The church was upset because they lost land and they lost status, and they even lost the sole claim to Catholicism being the legal only religion in France. The aristocracy was upset because of the loss of privilege, right? Louis XVI finds himself at a crossroads. And again, he could have embraced the new constitution, become first citizen of France. But again, he vacillates, right? Instead, in June of 1791, he attempts to flee Paris, flee his house arrest, right? And sneak off to Austria. This is where Marie Antoinette is from. Again, there might be some influence here, right? Where he had hoped to raise an army, of course, to put down the rebellion. But he was caught. He was seized by revolutionary guards at Varnay near the Austrian border, right? And at this point now, Louis is completely discredited. In August of 1791, the governments of Austria and Prussia are going to issue the Declaration of Pillnitz. The Declaration of Pillnitz urged all European monarchs to band together to restore Louis, who's effectively now just a prisoner in Paris. All right. By April of 1792, Austria and Prussia are invading France. They eventually will be joined by Great Britain, by Spain, and by Russia. Right. The monarchies are beginning to band together. The events of 1791, 1792 convinced the French people that they were no longer subject to a king, but citizens of a nation. Right, nationality is going to rule the day. A matter of fact, in reaction to this situation, a revolutionary officer named Rigaud de Lacy is going to pen what becomes known as the French national anthem, La Marseillaise. Right. The song is going to inspire the French to rally towards revolution. Okay, they're going to form citizen armies, and they're going to take on the invading Prussian and Austrian forces in September of 1792 at Valmy, and they're going to win. Right, these ragtag armies being put together are actually going to be quite effective. Right. This is the beginning of the French Revolutionary Wars that, when you tie in the Napoleonic Wars, is going to put Europe in a state of war pretty much from 1792 until Napoleon's final defeat in 1815. Right? Because the French Revolution threatened anyone with a crown on their head, every aristocrat, and even bishops in the church, Europe's ruling elite rose up collectively to try and crush the revolution, just as they had done in the cases of rebellion in both the Netherlands and in Poland.